What's up, guys? Today we're going to count down 15 of the oldest videos ever recorded. These are rare clips and they mark the exact moment the first motion pictures were captured and preserved. So, let's start with number 15, the Roundhay Garden Scene, 1888. The Roundhay Garden Scene. It is widely recognized as the oldest surviving motion picture in existence. It was filmed on October 14, 1888, in the garden of Joseph Whitley's home in Leeds, England, by French inventor Louis Le Prince. Using a single-lens camera that he designed himself, Le Prince captured a brief 2.1-second sequence of 4 people: Adolphe Le Prince, Sarah Whiteley, Joseph Whiteley, and Harriet Hartley, walking and turning in a garden. Though it may seem trivial today, this short clip represents the first known example of motion captured on film. Le Prince's camera worked by advancing photographic paper film through the device, exposing a series of still images in rapid succession, and when played back it produced the illusion of movement. The surviving footage was recorded at about 12 frames a second, which is a rate that makes the movement appear choppy but clearly dynamic. The original film was rediscovered decades later, and it was carefully restored from a deteriorated fragment, which allows modern audiences to view the world's earliest moving images. Louis Le Prince's work predated that of other pioneers like Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers. However, Le Prince never received the same recognition because his mysterious disappearance in 1890, just before a planned public demonstration in Paris, his absence meant that others, particularly Edison and the Lumieres, became more strongly associated with the birth of cinema. Despite the brevity, though, this garden scene is awesome for historians. It bridges photography and motion pictures. It shows that the transition from still images to moving film began earlier than most people realize. The short clip is silent, of course. It was filmed in daylight and shows simple human motion, which is perfect for testing a camera's ability to capture life. Today, these surviving frames are preserved by the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford in the UK. They are a crucial artifact in the story of film technology. Many scholars regard Le Prince as the true father of motion pictures. His camera design anticipated key features that were later used in commercial film cameras. Even in its simplicity, this garden scene conveys a sense of experimentation that defined the late 19th century. It's more than just a test. It's a preserved moment from 1888, showing real people laughing, walking, and unaware they were becoming part of film history. Number 14. Traffic Crossing, Leeds Bridge, 1888. Filmed just weeks after the Roundhay Garden Scene, Traffic Crossing at Leeds Bridge is another short film shot by Louis Le Prince in 1888. Recorded from an upper-floor window overlooking the Leeds Bridge in West Yorkshire, in England, this footage is believed to be the first moving image to capture everyday public life. It shows pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages crossing the bridge, ordinary scenes that in 1888 had never been documented in motion before. The sequence is about 2 seconds long. It consists of a series of still frames captured by his single-lens camera using paper film. And technically, this film is built upon Le Prince's earlier experiments. He was refining his process and camera design to capture more consistent exposure and motion. And unlike the garden scene, which featured family members and friends, Traffic Crossing turned its focus towards a public setting. This was kind of a documentary approach, decades ahead of its time. Now, what makes this footage important is that it captures not a staged performance, but an authentic street scene. It shows that Le Prince's vision extended beyond mere technical experimentation. He was already thinking about motion pictures as a way to record life. Preservation of this film was pretty difficult. Like all early experiments, the original paper negatives deteriorated over time, but enough frames survived for restoration. The restored footage can be viewed today, and it's one of the best preserved examples of pre-1890 moving images. And although Le Prince's name was largely forgotten during the early decades of film, his work in Leeds predated Edison's kinetoscope experiments by several years, and for that reason, historians continue to debate whether he should be credited as the true inventor of cinema. Number 13. The Dixon Greeting in 1891. The Dixon Greeting was a short film recorded in 1891, and it features William Kennedy Dixon, one of the chief engineers working under Thomas Edison. The film shows Dixon standing outdoors, smiling, bowing slightly, and removing his hat in a polite greeting towards the camera. The action lasts only a few seconds, but the significance of this clip is in how it was produced. Unlike earlier experiments by Louis Le Prince, this film was created using the kinetograph, a motion picture camera developed in Edison's laboratory designed specifically for recording sequences intended for playback. The Dixon greeting was filmed on a cylindrical celluloid film stock, which was a technical advancement over earlier paper-based media. Celluloid allowed for greater durability and clarity, and it became the standard medium for motion pictures for decades. The camera exposed images vertically along the film strip, capturing about 40 frames per second. It was much smoother than the earlier experiments and clearly recognizable as continuous motion. The film was intended to show the capabilities of Edison's motion picture system to potential investors, and at the time Edison was focused on developing a commercial ecosystem around moving images, pairing the kinetograph camera with the kinetoscope viewer, a peephole device designed for individual viewing rather than projection. The greeting by Dixon was not meant for a theatrical audience, but for controlled demonstrations inside Edison's labs. There is some uncertainty about the exact filming date, though. Most sources place it firmly in 1891, though some debate remains about whether it was recorded late in that year or during earlier testing phases slightly earlier. But what's not disputed is its position among the earliest Edison films to survive in recognizable form. While it lacks a narrative, sound, or any setting beyond Dixon himself, the film captures an important moment. A human acknowledging the camera as an audience. That simple gesture does foreshadow the relationship between the performer and the viewer that would define cinema for the next century. Number 12. Monkey Shines Number 1, 1890. So Monkey Shines Number 1, this is a short experimental film created around 1890, and it's among the earliest surviving moving images produced in the US. It was developed in Thomas Edison's laboratories during the earliest testing phase, and unlike later Edison films, Monkey Shines wasn't designed for entertainment or demonstration, but as a technical experiment to test it. The film is a blurry, ghost-like figure moving against a dark background. The subject appears to be a man performing simple movements, possibly exercising or gesturing, but the exact actions are difficult to identify due to the primitive recording process. Now, this quality is not a flaw of preservation, but a result of the technology itself. The image was recorded using experimental equipment that hadn't yet achieved any precise synchronization between the exposure and the film movement. The film is often attributed to Edison's lab rather than to Edison personally, and it may have been filmed by William Kennedy Dixon or other assistants working on prototypes. The approximate date of 1890 is based on lab notes and contextual evidence rather than the definitive documentation. Technically, Monkey Shines was recorded using a rotating drum mechanism with images captured sequentially onto photographic material. This result resembles a shadowy silhouette in motion, but the key achievement here was proving that successive images could be captured rapidly enough to suggest movement when viewed together. This experiment did help validate the concepts that would later be refined into the kinetograph system. Unlike the Dixon greeting, Monkey Shines Number 1 was never meant to be shown publicly. It was a lab test. And for that reason, its survival is somewhat accidental. Many early test films were just discarded once their immediate usefulness ended. But the film is preserved in fragmentary form, and its exact length does vary depending on restoration and playback speed. Modern presentations typically last only a few seconds. But when you see it today, Monkey Shines feels alien and unsettling. But it captures a turning point. It shows the moment when motion ceased to be theoretical and it became something that could be mechanically recorded. In that sense, it's a raw precursor to all motion pictures that followed, unfinished and unclear, but undeniably moving. Number 11. Fred Ott's Sneeze, 1894. Fred Ott's Sneeze is one of the oldest surviving motion pictures. It was recorded in 1894 at Edison Black Maria, the world's first purpose-built motion picture studio. The film features Fred Ott, an assistant who worked at Edison's laboratory, standing in profile as he inhales a pinch of snuff and sneezes forcefully. The clip lasts about 5 seconds. It was filmed using the kinetograph camera and intended for viewing through a kinetoscope, which is a peephole device that allowed only one person at a time to watch. Unlike earlier experimental films, the sneeze was created with commercial and legal intent. On January 7, 1894, Edison formally registered the film with the U.S. Copyright Office by submitting a series of photographic prints extracted from the motion sequence. This does make it the earliest known motion picture to receive copyright protection in the U.S. Now, technologically, the film demonstrates a major step forward from the earlier experiments like monkey shines. The image is clear, stable, and easily recognizable as continuous motion. The subject is framed deliberately, well lit by the Black Maria's rotating roof and open panels, which were designed to maximize sunlight. And by this point, Edison's team had largely solved the problem of capturing motion consistently on celluloid film. The choice of subject was practical rather than artistic. A sneeze provided a quick, dramatic movement that was easy to capture within a short time. This made it ideal for testing and demonstrating the camera's capabilities. Of course, there's no narrative or setting behind the studio backdrop, but the film succeeds in presenting a complete action with a beginning, middle, and end, which is something earlier experiments lacked. Fred's sneeze is important not just for its age, but for what it represents. It's the moment when motion pictures became intellectual property. By copyrighting the film, Edison signaled that moving images were no longer just scientific novelties, they were products that could be owned, distributed, and monetized. That concept would shape the film industry for decades. Seen today, this clip looks trivial, it's even humorous, but in 1894, it showed something new. That everyday human actions could be recorded, replayed, and then legally protected. That idea is at the foundation of all modern film and video. Number 10. Workers leaving the Lumiere factory in 1895. Workers leaving the Lumiere factory. It's one of the earliest motion pictures. Filmed in 1895, the short film shows employees exiting the Lumiere factory in Lyon, in France, and at the end of a workday. The film lasts roughly 45 seconds and was recorded using the cinematograph, a device invented by the Lumiere brothers that functioned as a camera, a printer, and a projector. This multi-function design set it apart from Edison's kinetoscope system, which required individual viewing. The cinematograph allowed films to be projected onto a screen for a group audience, making shared public viewing possible. Workers leaving the Lumiere factory was first publicly shown on December 28, 1985, at a cafe in Paris. This screening is widely regarded as the first commercial public film exhibition. And unlike earlier demonstrations held in labs or private settings, this event sold tickets to the general public and it presented multiple films in sequence. The content, of course, on the film is simple and unstaged. Men and women walk out of the factory gates, some on foot, some on bicycles, moving naturally without acknowledgement of the camera. Historians believe multiple versions of this scene were filmed, possibly on different days, though all surviving versions date to 1895. The uncertainty is in which version was shown first, not in the authenticity of the footage. The cinematograph used a hand-cranked mechanism and a lightweight film stock, which allowed for portability and on-location shooting. This kind of flexibility gave the Lumiere brothers an advantage in capturing real-world scenes across Europe and beyond. The Lumiere brothers didn't view cinema as a storytelling medium at first. They considered it a scientific and social novelty, and famously believed it had limited commercial future. Despite this, though, their public screening sparked some immediate interest and imitation, leading to rapid global adoption of the projected film. But today, Workers leaving the Lumiere factory is preserved in multiple archives, and it's one of the most studied films in cinema history. More than a century later, the film remains powerful in its simplicity. It just captures a real moment in time, ordinary people at the end of a workday, and it marks the point where recorded motion entered everyday life. Number 9. Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat, 1896. Arrival of a Train is one of the most famous early motion pictures ever recorded. It was filmed in 1896 by Louis Lumiere, one of the Lumiere brothers, using the cinematograph. This film shows a steam train pulling into the seaside station of La Ciotat in southern France, with passengers waiting on the platform and others stepping down from the carriages. The film runs for about 50 seconds. It was shot with a static camera placed diagonally to the tracks. That allowed the single train to grow rapidly in size as it approached the camera, creating a strong sense of depth and motion. The scene is unstaged and real. It features everyday travelers rather than actors, and the Lumieres were focused on documenting ordinary life, and this film reflects that early philosophy. Contemporary accounts report that early viewers were startled by the sight of the approaching train, with some stepping back or reacting defensively. And while later retellings sometimes exaggerate claims of panic, historians generally agree that the illusion of motion and depth was so striking to the audiences that were unfamiliar with projected film. Technologically, the film demonstrates the strengths of the cinematograph system. The image is stable, the motion is smooth, and the scene is well lit using natural light. And unlike Edison's kinetoscope films, which were individually viewed, this film was projected to audiences. And there's no narrative in the modern sense, it simply records an event from beginning to end. The train arrives, slows, stops, and passengers move about the platform. Yet this simple structure gave viewers a complete, understandable sequence, helping establish film as a medium capable of showing real-time events. Today, the film is widely taught in film history courses, and it's one of the clearest demonstrations of how powerful moving images were at the moment of their introduction. More than a century later, it still communicates the novelty of seeing real life captured and then replayed. Number 8. The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, 1895. The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots was produced in 1895 by the Edison Manufacturing Company, and it depicts the execution of Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, who was executed in 1587. The film runs for approximately 18 seconds and was intended for viewing through the kinetoscope. Unlike earlier films that simply record everyday activity, this production reenacts a historical event using actors and costumes. The scene shows Mary kneeling before a block, followed by the executioner raising an axe. At the moment of execution, the film uses a stop camera substitution. The actress is replaced with a mannequin, allowing the beheading to appear instantaneous when filming resumes. This technique is one of the earliest known uses of an in-camera visual effect. The film was likely directed and photographed by William Kennedy Dixon, though precise documentation is limited here. As with many Edison-era films, Edison himself supervised production but didn't personally operate the camera. The exact filming date is generally given as 1895, though some uncertainty remains regarding whether it was recorded late in the year or shortly before the public release. But what sets this one apart is the deliberate staging the actors perform for the camera. The setting is arranged and the event is clearly fictionalized. This is an important shift from motion pictures as documentation towards motion pictures as storytelling tools. The film demonstrates that editing and illusion could be used to manipulate time and your perception. Despite depicting an execution, the film is brief and restrained by modern standards. There's no sound, of course, no close-up detail, and no attempt at realism beyond the visual suggestion of the act. At the time, though, the effect was considered impressive, and it showed cinema's ability to depict events impossible to record directly. Though it was short and simple, this film shows that by 1895, filmmakers were already experimenting with illusion, narrative, and spectacle, and it's one of the earliest examples of cinema imagining events rather than merely recording them, and it marks a turning point in the medium's development. Moving on to number 7, The Boxing Cats, 1894. The Boxing Cats, this is a very old surviving motion picture created primarily for entertainment rather than documentation. Filmed in 1894 by the Edison Manufacturing Company, the short film shows two cats dressed in boxing gloves, standing upright and sparring inside a small ring while a human handler keeps them positioned. Though it appears whimsical today, the film represents an important step in the evolution of motion pictures. Staged performances designed to amuse audiences. It was produced through the kinetoscope, and like other Edison-era films, it was shot in the Black Maria studio in West Orange, New Jersey. This studio's rotating structure and retractable roof allowed the filmmakers to position the building towards the sun, which was essential because artificial lighting wasn't yet powerful enough. But The Boxing Cats is sometimes attributed to William Dixon, who saw most of the practical filmmaking at Edison's lab. While Edison's name is associated with the production, historians generally agree that Dixon and other technicians handled the filming itself. Now, what distinguishes this film from earlier ones is the cats are clearly placed in an artificial scenario intended to provoke laughter or surprise. This marks a shift away from simple recordings towards performance-based cinema. The animals don't just act naturally, instead they're positioned and guided to create a visual joke. The film is brief and lasts under a minute, but it shows early audience preferences. Scenes involving animals, physical comedy, or unusual behavior were especially popular because they were immediately understandable and they were visually engaging without sound or narrative. But from a modern perspective, The Boxing Cats kind of raises some ethical questions about animal treatment. However, sources do provide detailed information about how the cats were handled beyond what is visible on screen. and because of this lack of any documentation, it's not possible to make definitive claims about the conditions beyond the film moment itself. But in film history, The Boxing Cats is cited as an early example of cinema's capacity for humor and spectacle. It shows that by 1894, filmmakers were understanding that motion pictures could be more than just technical demonstrations. They could entertain us, surprise us, and provoke emotional reactions. And while it was simple and short, this film shows a growing awareness of audience psychology. It shows that early cinema was already experimenting with content designed to hold your attention, which set the stage for comedy performance and eventually narrative storytelling. Number 6. The Kiss, 1896. The Kiss is a very famous early motion picture and among the oldest surviving films to generate widespread public controversy. Produced in 1896 by the Edison Manufacturing Company, this short film depicts a close-up reenactment of a kiss between two stage performers, May Irwin and John Rice. The scene was based on a moment from the Broadway musical The Widow Jones. The film runs for about 18 seconds and was shot specifically for the kinetoscope viewing. Unlike earlier films that showed full body movement, The Kiss framed its subjects tightly, focusing on their faces as they leaned toward one another. This close framing was unusual at the time and intensified the audience reactions as the viewers weren't accustomed to seeing such intimacy magnified on screen. When the film was released, it sparked public debate and criticism. Some religious leaders and moral reform groups condemned it as inappropriate and indecent. Newspapers of the time recorded objections to what was perceived as an invasion of privacy or a violation of social norms. Those reactions make The Kiss one of the earliest documented examples of censorship-related controversy in film history. But technically speaking, the image is stable, the lighting is consistent, and the action is clearly readable. By 1896, Edison's team had refined their methods, which allowed for more deliberate framing and subject selection. The performers were experienced stage actors accustomed to exaggerating expressions that translated well to the silent film. The kiss itself is brief and restrained by modern standards. There's no extended embrace or dramatic buildup. However, the novelty of seeing such an intimate gesture recorded and replayed was enough to make the film memorable and controversial. Multiple prints survive and contemporary references confirm its production and exhibition in 1896. The identities of the performers are also well documented, as the film did directly recreate a known stage performance. The Kiss is historically significant because it shows cinema's ability to provoke emotion and a cultural response. It showed that film could challenge social boundaries, and it did reflect human intimacy in ways that other media couldn't. This realization would later lead to debates over film regulation and content standards. Though simple in execution, it marks an early point where moving images began to influence public discourse. It reveals how quickly film became more than a technical curiosity and started to evolve into a medium capable of shaping attitudes and, of course, sparking debate, which never seems to end. Number 5. L'arroseur arrosé, 1895. L'arroseur arrosé is often translated as the sprinkler sprinkled. It's one of the oldest surviving comedy films, and it's widely regarded as one of the first motion pictures created specifically to tell a fictional story with a punchline. It was filmed in 1895 by Louis Lumière using the cinematograph. It runs for about 45 seconds and depicts a simple stage scenario. A gardener waters plants with a hose while a mischievous boy steps on the hose, stopping the flow. When the gardener looks into the nozzle, the boy releases the hose, spraying the water into the gardener's face. The boy then attempts to flee and is caught and punished. Though brief, the sequence contains a clear setup, action, and resolution, and it makes it one of the earliest examples of a structured visual storytelling on film. Now, unlike earlier films that documented everyday life, this was deliberately scripted and performed. The actors were directed to carry out specific actions for the camera, which marks a clear departure from purely observational filmmaking. The film was publicly screened in 1895 and 1896 as part of the brothers' traveling exhibitions. Audiences responded strongly to the humor, and it quickly became one of the most popular films in their catalog. Contemporary accounts describe laughter and repeated viewings, suggesting that viewers recognized and appreciated the comic structure despite having little prior exposure to this new cinema. Technically, the film is simple. It uses a single static shot, natural lighting, and no camera movement, yet these limitations do force clarity in staging. All actions happen within the frame, and the timing is crucial. The clarity helped audiences unfamiliar with grammar understand what was happening and why it was funny. This film's success influenced other early filmmakers, particularly those working in fiction and comedy. It showed that audiences were willing to watch these staged scenes rather than purely documentary footage. This realization would later be expanded by filmmakers like Georges Méliès, who pushed fictional cinema into fantasy and spectacle. Today, this film is preserved by major film archives and frequently cited in film history education. Despite its age, though, it's understandable and effective. The humor relies on timing and visual cause and effect rather than dialogue, and it makes it accessible across cultures and generations. And in that sense, it established principles of visual comedy that are still used today. Number 4. Demolition of a Wall, 1896. Demolition of a Wall was a motion picture filmed in 1896 by Louis Lumière and is notable for introducing one of the earliest known uses of reverse motion in cinema. The short film shows a group of workers demolishing a brick wall. As the wall collapses, the dust fills the air and debris falls outwards. When the film is played in reverse, the wall appears to reassemble itself, rising back into place. This reverse motion effect was discovered during projection rather than planned during the filming. The early projectionist realized that by running the film backward, the sequence produced a cool illusion. This accidental discovery revealed that film could manipulate time, not just record it. The same footage could represent destruction or construction, depending on how it was shown, and that insight was crucial to the development of cinematic effects and editing techniques. The original filming was simple and documentary in nature. The camera remains fixed, the workers performed a real demolition, and the action unfolded naturally. The illusion existed entirely in the projection. There's no credible dispute about the film's authenticity or date, though some uncertainty exists regarding when the reversed version was publicly shown. Records do indicate that both forward and reversed versions circulated during the Lumière exhibitions. What is clear is that audiences found the reversed projection surprising and memorable. This suggested that film wasn't bound to linear time or even physical laws, and this kind of realization would later be exploited by filmmakers creating illusions and special effects. And while the Lumière brothers themselves didn't pursue fantasy filmmaking, their accidental discovery directly influenced others. Today, Demolition of a Wall is preserved in multiple archives. It marks the moment when film began to move beyond simple recording and into transformation. Viewed now, the effect is obvious, but in 1896, it challenged your assumptions about what was real and permanence, and the film showed that motion pictures could reverse time and reshape events and alter our perceptions, ideas that would become central to cinema's evolution. Number 3. The Horse in Motion, Sally Gardner at a Gallop, 1878. The Horse in Motion. This is best known through the sequence Sally Gardner at a Gallop. It's one of the earliest successful attempts to record motion in a form that could be viewed sequentially. It was created in 1878 by Edward Muybridge, an English-born photographer working in the U.S. While it wasn't filmed on a single strip of motion picture film, it is widely regarded by historians as a direct and essential precursor to cinema because it proved that motion could be broken down, recorded, and reassembled visually. This whole project was commissioned by Leland Stanford, former governor of California and a racehorse owner. At the time, there was a widely debated question: whether a horse ever lifts all four hooves off the ground simultaneously while galloping. Standard photography could not answer this question because exposure times were way too slow to freeze the rapid motion. Muybridge was tasked with solving this problem using photography rather than illustration or speculation. He arranged a straight track with a series of cameras placed side by side. Each camera was equipped with a fast shutter and connected to a tripwire stretched across the track. As the horse ran past, its movement triggered the wires, which caused the cameras to fire in rapid succession. The result was a series of sharply defined photographs, each capturing a distinct phase of motion. The most famous sequence shows the horse Sally Gardner ridden by jockey G. Dom. One frame clearly shows that all four hooves were indeed off the ground at the same time, though not in the stretched-out position previously assumed. This finding corrected a long-standing artistic and scientific misconception about animal locomotion. The photographs do survive in archives, publications, and museum collections, and their production is well documented through contemporary records. However, it's important to be precise. This wasn't a motion picture in the modern sense. The images were captured on individual photographic plates rather than a continuous strip of film. Despite that limitation, though, historians consistently place this work as the foundation of cinema. It showed that motion could be analyzed, segmented, and then visually reconstructed. In historical terms, the horse in motion represents the moment when movement became measurable, visible, and reproducible. Number 2. Chronophotographic Motion Studies, 1882 to 1888. The chronophotographic motion studies conducted by Etienne Jules Marey in the 1880s represent one of the most direct technological ancestors of motion picture film. Unlike Edward Muybridge, who used multiple cameras, Marey sought to capture motion using a single camera, recording successive phases of movement on one photographic surface. This approach brought recorded motion closer to true cinematography. Marey was a physiologist by training, not a filmmaker. His goal was to study the mechanics of movement in humans, animals, and birds. He believed motion could be scientifically understood only if it could be recorded with precision over time. To accomplish this, he developed chronophotography, a method that captured multiple exposures of a moving subject at fixed intervals. In 1882, Marey introduced the photographic gun, a camera shaped like a rifle that could capture 12 images per second on a single circular photographic plate. This allowed him to record birds in flight, one of the most complex forms of natural motion. These images survive and they're well documented, showing successive wing positions layered within a single frame. By the mid-1880s, he refined his system. He began experimenting with strips of sensitized material rather than plates, moving closer to continuous motion recording. In 1888, he successfully recorded movement on paper film, producing sequential images that use a single lens camera with an intermittent mechanism. This is a critical point in film history. Marey had created a system capable of capturing motion in a continuous sequence using one camera, which is a defining feature of cinema. Marey's surviving motion studies include humans walking, running, jumping, fencing, and animals in motion. The subjects were often dressed in black with white lines or markers attached to their limbs to make motion paths visible, and while the recordings were scientific rather than entertainment-focused, they clearly demonstrate continuous motion when viewed sequentially. Importantly, though, Marey's work influenced Georges Demegny, his assistant, who later attempted to commercialize motion image projection. Marey's ideas also circulated widely among European inventors, including those working on early film cameras in France and England. Chronophotography marks the point where motion ceased to be a series of disconnected experiments and became a systematic process. In the historical progression of recorded motion, Marey stands at the threshold between science and cinema. His work didn't entertain audiences, but it solved a core technical problem that cinema required: how to capture time itself, one frame after another, using a single eye. Number 1. Louis Le Prince and the first motion pictures ever recorded, 1888 to 1890. The earliest known motion pictures ever recorded are not defined by a single famous clip, but by a small body of experimental films created in the late 1880s by Louis Le Prince. These films, produced between 1888 and 1890 in England and France, represent the first verified instances in which moving images were successfully captured using a single lens camera on a continuous medium and then played back as motion. For this reason, film historians widely regard Louis Le Prince as the first person to make motion pictures, even though he never lived to publicly demonstrate his invention. Louis Le Prince was born in Metz in France in 1841 and later worked as an artist, chemist, and inventor. By the 1880s, he had become intensely focused on the problem that had occupied scientists and photographers for decades: how to record motion realistically and reproducibly. Still, photography was well established, but capturing successive images quickly enough to simulate movement remained unresolved. Le Prince approached the problem as an engineer rather than a showman, prioritizing mechanical function over presentation. In 1886, he began developing motion picture cameras while living in Leeds in England. His earliest designs include a 16-lens camera intended to capture multiple images simultaneously. While this system produced sequences of motion, it didn't solve the problem of smooth playback because the images were captured through separate lenses rather than a single optical path. By 1888, he completed a single-lens camera capable of exposing sequences of images on sensitized paper film. Unlike earlier multi-lens systems, LaPrince's single-lens camera captured motion in a way that closely resembles modern cinematography. Using this camera, he shot several sequences in 1888. Two of the films survive today, Roundhay Garden Scene and Traffic Crossing Leeds Bridge. Both were recorded in October of 1888 and are universally accepted by historians as the oldest surviving motion pictures. The films are brief, each only a few seconds long, but their significance is in what they prove. They show that LaPrince had solved the problem of motion capture years before Thomas Edison or the Lumiere brothers. What distinguishes his work from that of later pioneers is not only chronology, but completeness. By 1888, he had already developed a camera, captured motion successfully, and showed playback. What he lacked was public exhibition and legal recognition. That absence would prove decisive in how history remembered him. In 1890, LaPrince planned to publicly demonstrate his picture system in Paris and then seek patents in the United States, and such a demonstration would likely have established him as the inventor of cinema in the public record. However, on September 16, 1890, while traveling by train from Dijon to Paris, Louis LaPrince disappeared, and he was never seen again. The circumstances of his disappearance are unresolved, and there's no verified record of him having arrived in Paris, no confirmed sightings afterwards, and no recovered body. There have been theories proposed over the years, including accident, suicide, and foul play, but none have been proven. In the decades following his disappearance, his family attempted to restore his place in history. His son Adolphe testified in U.S. patent disputes involving Edison, asserting that his father had invented motion pictures earlier. Those efforts were ultimately unsuccessful, in part because Louis LaPrince wasn't alive to present first-hand evidence. But modern scholarship has reassessed LaPrince's contributions using surviving films, camera designs, and documentation. Institutions like the National Science and Media Museum in the UK preserve his surviving footage and recognize its importance. In assessing the oldest videos ever recorded, it's therefore necessary to distinguish between survival, public exhibition, and invention. While later films reached audiences first, LaPrince's work came first in time. The surviving Leeds films are the earliest moving images humanity has retained. There is no uncertainty about the dates of Roundhay Garden Scene or Traffic Crossing Leeds Bridge. Their production in October 1888 is supported by contemporary records and technical analysis. There is some uncertainty, though, regarding the total number of films LaPrince made and the fate of his lost footage, but that uncertainty doesn't affect the significance of what survives. Yet everything that followed, documentary footage, narrative films, special effects, and digital video, rests on the same principle he proved, that time could be captured frame by frame and replayed. For that reason, the oldest videos ever recorded aren't defined by popularity or projection, but by priority. At the very beginning of recorded motion stands Louis LaPrince. His surviving films are short, silent, and fragile, but they represent the first moment in history when reality itself was technically preserved in motion.